Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad. This is our content. In first part, we will introduce the author. In second part, we will recite the summary. And in third part, we will give you the meaning of psychological description. And in last part, we will give you critical analysis. Introduction of Joseph Conrad. Firstly, we talk about his early life. Joseph Conrad was born on December 3rd in 1857. His parents were arrested and sent to Russia because they are patriots of the Poland, so sometimes they do something against the Russian government. And after a few years, his parents died, so Joseph Conrad was raised up by his uncle in Poland. Secondly, we talk about his seafaring years. At the age of 16, he began his marine life in France. After suffering some economic problems, he joined British Merchant Marine, and later he became British citizen. During the journey, he had been to many countries, and these experiences inspire his fiction. Thirdly, we talk about his literary career. In 1896, he married Jessie Emily George. His first novel is Elmer's Folly, which describes an adventure in boreal jungles. Two of his most famous works are Lord Jim and Heart of Darkness. Lastly, we talk about his later life. His final novel, The Rover, was published in 1923. Next year, he died of a heart attack in England. He was the most influential writer in later 20th century. Nowadays, many people still read his novels. This is our summary of Heart of Darkness. In the beginning, we talked about Marlowe began to tell a story. And secondly, we talk about what things happen when Marlowe arrived Outer Station. Thirdly, we talk about things happen in Central Station. And the fourth one, we talk about things happen in Kursk Station. And the last one, we talk about when Marlowe returns to England, what things will happen. In the beginning of the story, 5 men sit on board of the Navy, which is a boat docked in the Thames. One of them is Charlie Marlowe, who tells them the story of his journey to African jungles. Marlowe starts his story in ancient Britain, almost 1900 years ago. His aunt helps him to find a job, commanding a ship for an ivory trading company. Things happen before and in Outer Station. Marlowe sails from Europe on a French steamer. Along endless coastline, he sees sweating and shouting black men. 30 days later, he visits a Sweden, who takes him to the company's Outer Station. He sees many hard-working black men. They are treated like slaves. They are tired and dying. Later, he meets a chief accountant. He talks about Kursk, says that he is a remarkable ivory agent. In Central Station, Marlowe finds his steamboat stuck in the river. It needs months to repair. The manager, who is hated by Marlowe, says Kursk is ill, perhaps died. During the time when Marlowe is waiting the rivets, he meets a pilgrim and a brickmaker and a boilermaker who talks about Kursk. On the way to Kursk Station, the jungles become thicker and darker. Things happen before and in Kursk Station. Before Marlowe gets near to Kursk Station, he discovers a faded note, a coverless book, and a stack of firewood in an abandoned hut. 8 miles from Kursk Station, Marlowe and the manager have an argument. Marlowe wants to go on, but the manager urges caution. When they arrive at Kurt's station, they camp up a Russian. When they find weak Kurt, they take him to the boat. Before Kurt's death, he gives Marlowe a packet of papers. After a few days, Kurt dies. His last words are, "The horror, the horror." Marlowe's return. After Marlowe comes back to London, he is visited by three people. One is a company officer. The other is a musician who claims to be Kurt's cousin, and another one is a journalist. Marlowe gives them the paper except the truth of Kurt. 1 year later, Marlowe visits Kurt's fiancée. She asks Marlowe what Kurt said before his death. Marlowe says that his last words is her name. In the end, Marlowe gets back on the board of Navy, looking in a far distance. He is thinking that heart of immense darkness. This is the summary of the story.
The meaning of psychological description is about Kurt and Marlowe. The first person is Kurt. In the heart of darkness, Kurt has two famous sentences. One is his last word, the horror, the horror. The other is on the last page of his report, exterminate all the brutes. The horror. The reason why he was so unstable is the psychological changing by darkness. In Europe, Kurt just a common businessman who was controlled by every single rule on every single day. However, in Africa, in the heart of darkness, he was the god of savage. He lied to savage. He slaved them and ruled them with his own mind. Being powerful made him lose direction. Without those fake rights, he just a white person from Europe. Eventually, Kurt was still attracted by the benefit of Europe and abandoned his follower, which was so savage. In the end of his life, he died from sickness of both mental and physical disease. He came from a heart of darkness to the other one, but realized they are always inside his mind deeply, the horror of human nature. Exterminate all the brutes. There was discrimination of colored and uncivilized savages. Kurt was one of the followers. He found out the truth of facts and the facts soon after he came to Africa. The fact was the Christianity. The fact was the fall of human beings. Kurt was one of the followers. He betrayed greatness. He made himself divinity, and he misled the savage about civilization. He was the brute. He was a civilization of domination of Europe. Second person is Marlowe. Marlowe was a common young man having ridiculous abstract of Africa and human nature. He said that the reason why he wanted to go to Africa, and as I looked at the map of it in a shop window, it fascinated me as a snake or a bird, a silly little bird. The silly little bird would realize soon how silly it was. At the first station, Marlowe was shocked by a white person with gun followed by a group of colored slaves with chains. It was the first time to meet the darkness of human nature. People with guns could rule the other people without guns, just a person with a gun. And a group of people would surrender in front of a person with a piece of metal. Those savages should hate the European, Marlowe, and Kurt. But some of young savages thought Kurt was God, and they were his pilgrims. They weren't cannibals anymore. They were slaves, pilgrims, and part of darkness. On the way to third station, Marlowe was closer darkness much more than before, because he felt the depression of life and the meaning of darkness. He saw those pilgrims kill the colored people with guns, not the white people on the boat. He saw a death of a cannibal. The cannibal stared at him without some kind of emotion until the last breath. His blood got on Marlowe's shoes. Marlowe threw them into the river and suddenly understood the possibility of the death of Kurtz. He knew the deeper of the river, the darker of the human nature. Eventually, they got to the first station. Kurtz was dying. Marlowe was crashing. Everything became heavy, dark, and ugly. Who was the savage? Kurtz was the savage. Marlowe was the savage. Everyone was the savage. Marlowe knew the savage wasn't about the civilization or Christianity. It was about human nature. On the way back to Europe, Marlowe crashed down after Kurtz died. Marlowe told Kurtz's fiancée the last word was her name. It was a lie, but wasn't a lie at the same time. Kurt was her fiancé, and she is Kurt's fiancée. To both of them, the last word represented a better life of Europe from absorbing colored people, a horror fact but ignored by every single European. Kurt wasn't just Kurt. He was a man having a fiancée, an excellent agent to company, a terrible guy using relationships to get rights for other agents, and the god of savage. Kurt was more complicated than we thought. The end of the story was a ship which was going to London, another part of darkness. Marlowe, the storyteller, had a conclusion that power corrupted people. The story of Africa, the story of Kurtz, changed him, and Kurtz became a part of Marlowe.